All right, Alexander, we have a shakeup in the Sunak administration. Suella Braverman out, cleverly taking Suella Braverman's position from foreign ministry to Home Secretary. And in comes David Cameron to become the foreign secretary, foreign minister. And King Charles had to actually make Cameron a lord because he wasn't a serving MEP. So within one day, Cameron becomes Lord David, and he also becomes the foreign secretary of the UK. Prime Minister David Cameron from 2010 to 2016. David Cameron, who oversaw the destruction of Libya, tried to start a war with Syria, and of course he is the prime minister who will go down in history for the Brexit referendum.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts?
Well, I have to say, I mean, and this isn't just my thoughts, I mean, it is I think, a widespread feeling in Britain. I mean, it's, as the French say, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they remain the same. So, we started, we had, we've been through all that process. There was the Scottish referendum, there was the Corbyn movement, the Corbyn moment in the Labour Party. We had as you correctly say, the Brexit referendum. We've had all of these things going on. We had Johnson, Truss, and we end up back where we started, exactly back where we started, with David Cameron coming back, this time as Foreign Secretary. As you said, he's been given a position in the House of Lords. He's now Lord Cameron, by the way. This is his formal title from this moment. So we all have to address him from now on, if we ever meet him, as my Lord. There we go. Anyway, so he's now back and he is a member of the cabinet. Now, look, if we go back to the events that led up to the fall of Liz Truss, you remember I said that it was an establishment plot at the time? You also remember, I'm sure, that I also said that Rishi Sunak, who became Prime Minister, is absolutely, the globalists' choice for Prime Minister of Britain. And what we have seen is, ever since then, a steady movement back. The globalist, neocon, old order, the establishment are now fully back. Even David Cameron, as you said, the destroyer of Libya and the man who nearly brought us into a war with Syria, even he is back now. It's, as I said, we've gone full circle. We've tried all those changes and we've ended up exactly where we were when we started in Britain. And this is happening at one and the same time as we have reports from the Bank of England that the British economy is now in a period of indefinite stagnation. That's basically what they're saying, that there's no prospect of, things shaking up or changing there. And Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, well, of course, who is he now regularly seen with? There's lots of pictures of them together now. He and Tony Blair. So Tony Blair with the Labour Party, he's, best of friends with Keir Starmer, and David Cameron now in Rishi Sunak's cabinet. The remaining Brexiteers, Suella Braverman being the last one, basically, of any significance. Not, by the way, that I liked her or thought much of her as Home Secretary, but that's another story. Anyway, they've all been pushed out. So we have the old establishment, the Blair-Cameron axis. They're back in control. They're doing it through their proxies, Sunak and Starmer. And, of course, pulling the strings is the old establishment, which has won all the political battles that we've seen in Britain being fought out over the last, 7 years?
Yeah, did we even get a real new establishment in the UK, a new blood in the UK to perhaps enact some some change or some progress, or were we just being fed these stooges all along to get to this eventuality of Blair and Cameron, and what is expected of Cameron, by the way, as foreign minister? I mean, what's he going to accomplish? What is expected of this one-time prime minister who is now, I don't know, has he been demoted? I mean, he's a lord, but he went from prime minister to foreign minister, so I'm not sure. Is this a positive move for him, or what's the deal here?
Oh, it is clearly a positive move for him. I mean, I mean, bear in mind, after the Brexit referendum, he had to resign. He was then he was severely criticised because of his lobbying activities on behalf of a company which went bankrupt, and so he was criticised a lot over that and about the way in which he went about making money. He was widely discredited, and now, of course, he's back, and he's been given one of the most senior positions in the government. And, of course, what his diplomatic skills are, which are going to make him such a successful foreign secretary, I have absolutely no idea. He is not on speaking terms with the Russians. They don't particularly like him. The Europeans of any kind probably haven't forgiven him because of the Brexit referendum. His work in the Middle East was an absolute disaster. Even The Economist, which is pretty mainstream, says that he was one of Britain's worst prime ministers. Now he's come back. So, you know, what he brings to the quality of British diplomacy, I can't see. And but what it tells you, and maybe, you know, let's not worry too much about that, because British diplomacy anyway is something of an oxymoron at the moment. I mean, you know, presumably he can't be worse than Liz Truss was as Foreign Secretary, for example. So I mean, let's put that aside. What it does, though, is it tells you again who is firmly in control in Britain, and we have, in effect, moved back to where we were back in 2014. I mean, we you know, there's I don't know whether you know, there's that game of snakes and ladders that people play, in which they sort of go all the way up, and then they find themselves at the top, and then they get to the top of the head of the snake, and they walk slither all the way back to where they started. Well, this is exactly what's happened. I mean, Britain has thrown away a whole decade. It's a huge effort, huge political effort, massive political mobilization by people. I mean, the Corbyn movement in the Labour Party was a huge political movement. The Brexit movement was an even bigger political movement. And all that's happened is that, you know, all of that might not... The Scottish independence movement was a big movement also. And all of that has come to absolutely nothing at all.
The end of Sunak. This is basically the final days, weeks, months, whatever of Sunak, and this is a huge embarrassment for the UK. At least that's how I'm analyzing this. True or not true?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, to come back to what you were saying, asking me about, you know, are these people going to come up with something? And did the other people who, you know, the people who we thought were coming up, you know, did they actually have ideas? It's clear that they didn't. I mean, we have a political system which is incapable of coming up with fresh ideas. Britain's problems are growing. And I mean, you know, I was telling you, you know, in a conversation we had, how in London, for example, policing has all but collapsed. Now, this is, by the way, a separate issue from the argument between Braverman and the police, which over the protests, where I, if anything, tend to be more sympathetic to the police than to Braverman. But I'm talking about ordinary routine policing in London has all but collapsed. For example, I mean, if certain types of cars are now stolen regularly, and from what I can understand, the police barely bother anymore to to try to investigate these car thefts, which have become an epidemic. And so policing has collapsed. There's a general sense that the economy is in a deep sense of malaise. Public debt is growing. Inflation, despite what you hear, is still a problem. The cost of living for many people is still very high. I was hearing reports, for example, that many people in Britain have to shut down, have to switch off their refrigerators because they need to save on energy bills, which means that they can't keep their food fresh. And, apparently this is now a problem. But, faced with these sort of problems, which are, I'm just talking about those problems that people see on the surface, not the underlying problems in the economy and in society, which are getting worse. Faced with those kind of problems, no one at all has come up with any remotely plausible or workable solutions or ideas. And of course, we've ended up again with that same group of people who arguably brought us to this point in the first place.
Yeah, well, with the police, I mean, maybe there's been a breakdown in policing with regards to theft and other criminal activities. But if you post something that's naughty, the police make sure to be at your door right away.
That by the way is very true. And if you want me to discuss again briefly the Braverman, the row between Braverman and the police. I mean, there were big protests in London over the weekend over the situation in the Middle East. Braverman took a very, very strong position over them. But I mean, it was absolutely clear that what she basically wanted to do was to ban those protests. And I don't think that there was any occasion or warrant for banning those protests. But that is the steady trend in Britain now. It is towards banning protests. Braverman wants to start banning protests. So, from a different angle, does every other section of the British political class. We're having more protests banned, more restrictions on what people could say, more problems about conducting open debates in universities and things of that kind. And you're absolutely correct. In terms of what the police do, they are much more involved in dealing with that kind of problem than they are in dealing with the ordinary, basic, routine policing, which is so essential in order to make life tolerable. So, I mean, that is absolutely the trend here. And, of course, we have a huge industry of people here now who are basically there, to say, what we should read and what we shouldn't read, and to give all kinds of labels to all sorts of, to people who are saying all the wrong things. So, and that is, that's an actual growing industry. It's a business now. So that does exist in Britain. Britain is becoming less free, more authoritarian, more restrictive, as the establishment shores up its control, even though it senses, it knows that it has no answers to the underlying problems of the country, and feels that the wider British public basically despises them.
Yeah. Just a final thought. I feel like over the last 10 years, now that we have Blair and Cameron back again, it just gives you the feeling that not only the entire UK, but the entire world has been conned. This has been like a 10-year con job. Liz Truss, Theresa May, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak. It's just been one con to get us, like you said, right back to where the state of affairs were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Blair and Cameron, just bring back Merkel and Hollande and Hillary Clinton, Obama. Trudeau is already there. So, I mean, just bring them all back, I mean, it's crazy, man.
Oh, yes, absolutely right. And of course, if you're talking about Britain, I mean, our international prestige has collapsed around the world, partly because they can see that. But Absolutely. That is exactly, I think, what a lot of people feel around the world. And no more so, however, than in Britain, where 10 years ago there was a genuine impulse, a grassroots impulse seeking change. And people, as you rightly say, in Britain do feel conned. Perhaps they feel more conned here than anywhere else.
Yeah. All right. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop. 20% off. Use the code, the Duran20. Take care.